Warning, this video talks about several subjects surrounding mental health. This is only my personal experience, and if you relate, please try to contact a professional or do more research before coming to any conclusions. The video contains direct examples and stories from my personal journey with OCD. It does not represent the full spectrum of the condition. There's a lot of things that I share that might be triggering, including stalking, derealization, panic attacks, and generalized themes of mental and physical stress. Please watch with discretion. I have OCD. Now, a few things might pop up in your head when I say this. It might be I have to organize things, or I have to keep things neat or very particular. While all of those are ways that OCD can manifest itself, there are in fact a lot of ways that aren't necessarily talked about. I thought there was no way that I could have it simply because of the fact that I didn't know what it could be, which is partly why I'm making this video. Even just looking into it was something that I was scared to do for the longest time, so if this video is able to help at least one person, then I've done my job. Now, like I said in the intro, I'm going to be sharing a lot of my personal stories of how OCD has affected my life, and I would say that if you relate to anything that I say or find anything that you resonate with, I highly recommend talking to a professional or doing more research before coming to a conclusion. Trying to treat or cope with something that you may not have can sometimes lead to more harm than good, so please be mindful of that. For the longest time, I just thought that I was anxious. See, I had been diagnosed with both ADHD and anxiety, and I thought, cool, that's it. That explains it all. Surely there isn't something more looming that actually makes a lot of sense that dictates how I act in my everyday life. That would be so silly. Now, my relationship with mental health, especially because of this job, has always been a rocky one. For a while, I just kind of left it untreated, or I would try some medication that would make me feel better for a little bit and then promptly go off of that medication because I felt better. I would always think a few things. If I go to therapy, it might set me back. I'm doing all right now, so I'm worried it'll make things even harder for me. Or I do think I just need medication. I feel fine on it, so why therapy? And when I would actually end up going to therapy, I would think, this isn't working for me. Because although I was treating things that contributed to how I felt, I was missing a huge piece of the puzzle. And when I didn't suddenly feel better, it would be really hard for me to stick to a program. It would be really difficult for me to not just do anything else, really. Now, before we go any further, we need to make sure that we're on the same page. Now, OCD isn't just making things neat or organized, despite what the Rhett and Link song showed. I'm just kidding, Rhett and Link. I love you guys. I forgive you. OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder, is a condition that gives you unwanted thoughts or feelings, and those feelings then turn into compulsions, or acts that get rid of a fear or a trigger. Hey, Editing Ranboo here. I just wanted to clear up that it is also possible to have either only obsessive symptoms or only compulsive symptoms as well. I forgot to put that in the scripts. That's my bad. It traps you in a cycle in which the trigger gets so intense and your stress just gets more and more until you perform the behavior, such as, asking for reassurance, making sure that the stove is off, making sure that your door is closed, and it neutralizes it until the next time that it pops up. It's sort of a self-soothing cycle that kind of feeds into itself. I struggle specifically with intrusive thought OCD, meaning at any time I could be subjected to a line of thought that is completely out of my control that feels real to me. It makes me feel not safe. It makes me feel like I have to do something to make sure that I'm safe. It can make me feel worried that for my safety, worried that I'm not a good person, worried about my relationships. I would always go to the worst possible scenario, and it would feel real. It feels like what I have in my head is something that is always going to happen. If something starts happening, it will always lead to the worst possible event until I do something about it. And the tough part about it is that it wasn't always caused by something. And this was one of the hardest things for me to deal with, is that sometimes I would just be chilling, doing absolutely nothing, when suddenly I would get the idea that something was wrong, and I would get the need to make sure that I need to right that wrong. I need to, make sure that the door is closed. I need to make sure that my friends still like me, all that jazz. Despite there, again, being zero evidence for this thing happening. And sadly, when your mind has you feel like you need to fix something that is wrong when nothing is wrong, when something is actually wrong, it gets so much more intense. For a while, I felt like my intrusive thoughts kind of made me a terrible person. I had a hard time trusting people. I would consistently check that I wasn't randomly getting canceled or that my job was just going to instantly disappear. Sometimes it would even be little things, like if I didn't check that I locked the door, that someone would come in and murder me. Now, you may be thinking, isn't it good to check things sometimes? And while, yes, it is good to make sure that you didn't leave your keys in the back of a taxi, it isn't good to feel like if you didn't make 100% sure that whatever you left there is going to affect you later on. And like I said, there are many different types of OCD out there. Mine is only one out out of hundreds, if not thousands. So I may not cover everything that OCD possibly can be. I'm only covering my personal experience with it. Now, let me give you a more personal example of how my OCD affected me. When I was around 17 years old, I was stalked. There would be people who would try to figure out where I was, who I was, take photos of me, look into my personal life, and this really messed me up. So pretty much for the first 3 years of me even having this job of being Ranboo, I would make sure that what I did, that I was always accounting for that. Because my thought process was that if I didn't make sure that I was 100% safe, that I wasn't safe, that people were going to hurt me. Now, people weren't out to always get me all the time, but sadly, because of the fact that some people were, it sometimes felt like everyone was. So I would check. I would make sure to hide things on stream. I would make sure to even not turn certain angles because I was afraid of what people would go off of with that. This lasted for a while, like I said. I would consistently be stuck in this cycle of seeing something that upset me, trying to figure out how to get rid of it, and it just kept going. It controlled my life for years. I stopped making and doing a lot of the content that I wanted to do because the time was taken up by just endlessly scrolling, reporting things, trying to figure out how to stop these people from doing these things. I spent a lot of my time just making sure that I was safe. It was exhausting to be in this loop. I didn't take care of myself. I didn't even feel like a person at times. Every time I streamed, there was the endless thought cycle that I wasn't safe. I needed to make sure that everything that I said was not going to give anything away, was not going to give anything for anyone to feed on. Because if I didn't make sure that I was safe, it felt like I wasn't safe, like someone was going to harm me and those around me. I ended up pushing away a lot of old friends because of this, because I didn't know where the information was coming from. The mask felt less like protection and more of a necessity, like I needed to have it on all the time because who knows what could happen. I felt like I had to be careful about everything that I said because if I slipped up, then people would use that and try to get to me personally. I purposely subjected myself to all the terrible things that people were saying and doing because in my head, being aware of it was a lot better than not being aware of it and having something bad happen. But I never really felt like I could talk about it. I would get notified that people on the internet were doing and saying awful things that affected me and my community. And my thought process mainly was at that time that if I say something, that's just not going to make it better. All that's going to happen is the people that do or say those bad things are just going to be fueled by the fact that I noticed them and just continue to do it harder. Now, while this is true sometimes, it isn't true all of the time. And that's actually one of the biggest lessons that you have to learn when you have OCD, is that just because something happened or something is true sometimes doesn't mean it's true all the time. But back then, I kind of felt like if something bad could happen, then I shouldn't even give it a chance to happen because then it would be my fault. And in a lot of cases, that wasn't always the best course of action, and my silence only gave the impression sometimes that I was okay. While OCD has contributed to a lot of bad in my life, I'm not trying to blame all of my mistakes on OCD. At the end of the day, I still made the decisions that I made, and all I can really do is just learn from the thought processes that I had and try to avoid those in the future. Now, my OCD also manifested itself in another way as well, of sort of a running dialogue of anything that could possibly be happening at any time. It felt like I had 3 other voices consistently going in my head, rehearsing what I was about to say or figuring out what I have to do. I would scan a room when I walked in, I would assess any threats, and I would perform those neutralizing behaviors to make sure that I was safe. It was kind of like that story where a guy had a knife dangling over his head. I just never felt safe no matter where I was, and I did everything in my power to make sure that I was safe. Now, it wasn't always about safety. It also did really affect me socially. I would end up not talking to people because I had the fear that talking with them would make them hate me, or that they already hated me and talking with them would make them hate me even more. Or I would have the idea that if I didn't talk to someone, they would also not like me, so I should talk to them as well, but not too much. It was exhausting. I would kind of get stuck in the loop of either being too much or feeling like I wasn't enough. My OCD made me hyper aware of any actions that someone would do socially. And when it found some kind of fear for me to latch onto, my brain latched onto it until I made sure that it was okay. I wouldn't be able to stop thinking about it until I made sure that it was okay. For the longest time, even way before content creation, I was really afraid of losing the ones that I held close and appreciated. Sadly, to the point where a lot of the behaviors I did to make sure that they were okay ended up pushing them away. What my kind of OCD did was it was kind of like an overprotective force. It would cover up any potential sharp corner that I could hit my shin on with a foot of foam to the point where I couldn't even use the table. It made me play everything so safe that I was barely living, that I was barely me. For the longest time, I didn't even believe that I could have OCD, and that's sadly due to the way that most people portray it. They view it mainly as either needing to be clean or you better, organize that messy pile or something. And while those both can be manifestations of OCD, it goes a lot deeper than that. And not enough people realize that. It can be paralyzing. For me, it just never made me feel like I was ever safe. It wasn't until my roommate Moonsey recommended that I looked into the full scale of what it could be. And that's when I realized that I could be someone that has OCD. And this was only like 6 months ago now. And that was the first step in me actually taking my life back. Everything just clicked into place when I realized what it was. The most helpful thing for me was just realizing that my intrusive thoughts were just that, intrusive. They weren't always what I felt or what I wanted to believe, and just because I had them didn't mean that I was a bad person or didn't mean that I always had to act on them. I realized I can't really control how or what I think, but I started the steps to learn how to live with those thoughts and be able to take back my life. It took me a second to start, but a few months back, I started a program called IOP, or an intensive outpatient program. Here, I was put through a lot of exposure therapy 5 days a week for 2 to 5 hours every day. And here I was also given the resources to understood both what I had and how to deal with it. I stopped fighting the thoughts that I would have or making sure that I was safe, and instead allowed those thoughts to exist and understand where they came from. I would put myself into situations in which I would normally feel very unsafe and just allowed myself to be unsafe. But here's the funny thing about that is that every single time that I felt unsafe, I would feel a little bit safer. For a while, I was able to face some of my thoughts head on and not feel the need to make sure that they weren't happening or that they weren't real, because maybe they were, maybe they weren't. I learned how to live in the moment instead of trying to figure out everything that could go wrong in the future. With each exposure practice, my anxiety would improve, my reactions would improve, and my intrusive thoughts would have a lot less of an effect on me. And I'm happy to say that as of the last couple of weeks, I've actually graduated from that program. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm cured, because you can't really cure OCD, but it just means that I'm able to handle it, that I've taken back control of my life. I now get to face the world without OCD controlling most of everything that I do. I get to do more real exposures now. I get to purposely throw myself into real world situations that would normally cause me a lot of stress and just ride the wave. In fact, this video has actually been a big exposure practice for me. I was scared for a long time of admitting a lot of the things that I did in this video because I was worried about what people would think, of what people would try to look into or whatever. So I made this video to not only help others, but also to help me. My reasoning for including a lot of the stories and examples that I did was to hopefully show where I was and what my thought processes were when I was at my worst, but also show that you can be at your worst and still get better. It might just take some time. My biggest mistake that I made was not being serious about getting help sooner. I should have gotten it years ago, but I kept putting it off. If you take anything from this, it would just be to reach out, start working on your mental health if you're struggling with it. Which I know sounds a lot easier said than done, but trust me, even small steps help. Find what resources are available to you, find community that can help you. Take those small steps because it's a lot better than just standing still. I wish that I had gotten help a lot sooner than I did, and I really should have. There's a lot that I regret, but now, thankfully, I'm not able to have those regrets ring in my mind consistently, or I feel like I always have to make them right. I'm able to live my life again, but better this time around. So, like I said, if you can, find the resources that are available to you and take care of yourselves. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. It means a lot to me.